Well, the U.S. Supreme Court formally overturned Roe versus Wade on Friday, concluding that the constitutional right to an abortion sustained for over 50 years is no longer valid. By late Saturday morning, a crowd of demonstrators had gathered in front of the Supreme Court and Capitol. Joining me now to weigh in on this developing story is Johanna LeBlanc, foreign policy and national security law expert, as well as Jamila White, principal at BlakQuity, an international development and humanitarian expert. Well, a warm welcome to both of our guests. Thank you so much for joining us. Johanna, I'd like to start with you. You know, the decision by the U.S. Supreme Court to overturn Roe versus Wade has sent shockwaves globally. And I think the question on a lot of people's minds is, you know, what happens now, especially in those states where we know that there were already abortion trigger laws?
Unfortunately, now it lies with the states. So it is more important than ever before for people to go out and vote and to make sure that they vote in elected officials who are pro-life, because the hands of the president is tied, so is the hands of Congress. Because of the ruling that was announced on Friday, even if Congress were to codify Roe v. Wade, it will be challenged at the Supreme Court, because obviously the Supreme Court trumps any other laws of the land. So it is incredibly important for people to go out and vote and be engaged. And again, elections have consequences, and this is one of those consequences. And the presidency of Donald Trump will have a lifetime effect, and it will affect millions of people for centuries. And so again, it really goes back to the states, and people have to mobilize and get engaged and get involved in politics and go out and vote accordingly.
Jamila, I would like to bring you into the conversation just to talk to us about the sort of irreparable harm that this decision is likely to cause to women and young girls. I mean, we're talking about implications on the quality of life for a lot of women in the U.S. Just talk to us about what the research and data is saying about those abortion statistics and what we're likely to expect as part of the fallout from this decision.
Thank you for that question. I don't quite kind of have the fallout from this decision and what it will. I do know is that right now black women and brown women and girls in this country have such, especially when it comes to reproductive, to maternal mortality, and when it comes to so many other factors, and we know that black and brown women and girls the most, because we're already acted. We already can go to the doctor and not receive the same quality that white women receive in this country, and so hit us harder. And many black women and Native women, what I call the former Confederate states, that Confederacy, and then those who weren't pretty much white supremacist principles. A lot of black people, black women and girls live in those states. So now is the time to provide resources, medical care that they need, whether it's in the state or out of the state. And so calling on the president to expand Medicaid access to the services, call states, the private sector to provide this type of support. One thing for us to kind of remember is the basis of Roe v. Wade. It was based on the 14th Amendment, and that's the same.
Jamila, we seem to be losing your audio. I wonder if we can't just try and reestablish that connection with you again, just so that we can better hear you and the responses that you're giving us. But in the meantime, while we try to resolve that audio problem, Johanna, just talk to us about some of the, the far-reaching consequences that has formed part of much of the conversation since that decision. There's been whispers already from Justice Clarence Thomas about the reconsideration of past rulings that could have implications on women's bodily integrity, same-sex marriages, contraception. There's a lot of concern that this decision to overturn Roe versus Wade may, in fact, just be the beginning.
Yeah, one of them, there are a number of implications, and one of them is what we call stare decisis in law, right? And that is relying on previous court rulings to determine how the court will rule in future cases. So now what we saw is that the court did not follow precedents. The court completely deviated. So as lawyers, as those of us in the legal profession, we're not asking ourselves, what about the right to marriage, same-sex marriage, and countless other rights that we have here in this country. And as Clarence Thomas, Justice Thomas mentioned in the ruling, that some of these cases should be reconsidered. So we are greatly concerned about the court's ruling and the implication that it will have on future cases. And when you look at the 14th Amendment, this is our right to privacy that has been fundamentally undermined by the U.S. Supreme Court. And also we look at what states are going to do now, states that were already against abortion, states that are so-called against pro-life. We're looking at the kind of legislation that's going to be followed by the court's ruling, and a number of states have already taken steps that are harmful, that will be harmful to women and girls who, as my co-panelists indicated, already have a hard time getting access to health care here in this nation. So the implication of this case goes beyond our right to abortion. It also goes to our right to privacy, which is guaranteed under the 14th Amendment.
Jamila, I understand that we do have you back on the line. You were, of course, still taking us through some of the consequences in terms of the quality of life for women in the U.S., black women particularly as well, women of color in the U.S. But I want to know if there's been any work already done sort of in preparation for this decision, because we know that there was a leaked draft, and I know that a number of reproductive freedom organizations immediately got to work to try and figure out what the way forward would look like post the overturning of Roe versus Wade. Talk to us about those efforts.
That's a great question. Can you all hear me?
Yes, I believe we can hear you.
Okay, great. Even though I'm in Washington, D.C., I live on east of the river, a side that has less access to internet, the digital divided side of the city. So apologies for that. I like to say, like, a lot of abortion activists and women's reproductive health activists, they've been saying this for years. None of them are surprised. They've been screaming about this for years because there's been so many attacks and so many indications that this was eventually going to come. And like Johanna said, during the Donald Trump administration, looking at the people he put on the court, many of them knew that that was kind of the final straw. So activists have been working in this space to prepare for this day in terms of making sure that they're ready to figure out other legal recourse, and also have actions for the president and actions for Congress that they can enact today. And so those actions have been listed. There has been a call out to the president, a call out to Congress on what to do to help provide that access, and how to help change, what's going forward. One of the biggest calls out there is to expand the Supreme Court. There's been discussion and debate around expanding the Supreme Court for years. The Supreme Court is only 9 people. It's not really reflective. As we know, there are no kind of term limits for the Supreme Court. You're there for a lifelong term. And so making it more equitable and justice for this population in this era that we are in now. And so there's calls for the president to do that. And so it'll be interesting to see over the next several months. This is an election year, not for the president, but for Congress, to see what comes out and what goes into play over the next several months.
Yeah. Johanna, talking about what Jamila just ended off on there, the possibilities that lie before President Joe Biden, I suppose the opportunities that he has in an attempt to remedy what has happened. Just talk to us about that. He's already said that he'll do anything in his power to, protect the rights of women to abortion. But we know that there are bipartisan efforts currently underway in Congress. This is also an important year for Congress. Just talk to us about those efforts and whether or not you believe they'll yield any real tangible fruits.
Well, in anticipation of the court's ruling, the U.S. Congress, under the leadership of Speaker Nancy Pelosi, did introduce legislation to codify Roe v. Wade, which passed in the House, but ultimately failed in the Senate. So I think Congress, the Democrats, have done their part to codify this fundamental right that women should have in this country. But unfortunately, it failed. And as I said earlier, even if Congress were to bring forth legislation again and it were to pass in the Senate, it would be challenged in the Supreme Court because the court's current ruling will trump any legislation around abortion, constitutional rights as it relates to abortion here in the United States. But as my co-panelists indicated, I think ensuring that people have access to contraceptives, people have access to travel to other states to receive abortion services. But what I'm seeing is that there are some states that are looking to make it unlawful for their citizens to travel to other states to perform for the purpose of abortion. So there are some officials, elected officials, governors, and legislatures across the nation that are going to do whatever it takes to undermine this fundamental right that women should have in this nation. So again, I think one of the options would be to possibly expand the Supreme Court, as my co-panelists indicated. But really, this court's ruling, the Supreme Court is the highest court of the land, and when the Supreme Court speaks, it's the law of the land.
Unfortunately, to both our guests, we are going to have to leave that conversation there, but I want to thank both of you for joining us. That is Johanna LeBlanc, a foreign policy and national security law expert, as well as Jamila White, principal at BlakQuity and international development and humanitarian expert.